When a millionaire's son returns from his piano lesson to his father's luxury restaurant, the noble boy sees a little beggar girl shivering with fever at the establishment's entrance. Realizing she's cold and hungry, he brings her inside and decides to feed soup to the girl himself. When the millionaire sees his son feeding the sick little girl, the powerful businessman approaches furiously, but before saying anything, he notices something disturbing in the child's face that makes him freeze completely. What happens in the next few minutes leaves everyone in absolute shock. The clinking of silver against fine china echoed through the main dining room of the Gilded Spoon, as executives in expensive suits and bejeweled socialites savored elaborate dishes under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The delicate aroma of shaved black truffle over handmade pasta hung in the air-conditioned room, mingling with the bouquet of the most expensive wines from the restaurant's private cellar. Michael, seated at the grand piano in the corner of the room, adjusted the bow tie of his miniature tuxedo. His small fingers, calloused from constant practice, rested on the ivory keys. At 10 years old, he was already known to the regulars as the musical prodigy, son of the owner, Richard Morgan. He had just returned from his piano lesson when something unusual caught his attention through the restaurant's French doors. A small, trembling figure was huddled against the establishment's outer wall. Michael discreetly approached the window, observing with growing concern the girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Her dress, once white, was stained and torn. Dark, matted hair framed a pale, feverish face. Without hesitation, Michael abandoned his post at the piano and headed for the restaurant's back door. Careful not to be noticed by the busy kitchen staff, he grabbed a bowl of the soup of the day, a cream of asparagus with slivered almonds, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The girl flinched as he approached, trying to shrink further against the wall. "Don't be afraid," Michael whispered, crouching down to her level. "You must be hungry. It's warm." The girl's eyes fixed on the steaming bowl, but she didn't move. Michael then noticed something peculiar about her gaze. One eye was a deep blue, like a summer sky, while the other was the color of amber honey. Hunger eventually overcame fear, and her small, trembling hands accepted the bowl. "Come with me," Michael said, helping her up. "It's warmer inside." He led her through the main entrance, ignoring the shocked stares of the patrons as they crossed the elegant dining room. He settled her at one of the more discreet tables near the piano and began to patiently feed her the soup. Whispers of indignation soon circulated. How can they allow this in an establishment of this caliber? Where's security? This is outrageous. But Michael remained focused on his task, offering each spoonful gently, while the girl ate ravenously. That's when the main doors opened and Richard Morgan entered the restaurant. Tall, impeccably dressed in a custom-made Italian suit, he exuded an aura of authority that silenced the entire room. His brown eyes, always alert to any imperfection in his establishment, immediately located the unusual scene. "Michael!" His deep voice cut through the air. "What do you think you're doing?" He strode across the room, his expression a mask of disapproval. But as he neared the table, something made him stop abruptly. The girl lifted her face, and her heterochromatic eyes met Richard's. The businessman staggered as if he'd been punched in the gut, his skin turning a shade of pale that alarmed the nearby staff. Those eyes, they were identical to Helen's. The silver locket hanging around the girl's neck glinted under the chandelier light, and Richard felt his legs weaken. He'd recognized that piece of jewelry anywhere. It was the same one he'd given his sister for their last Christmas together, 15 years ago, before the fight that destroyed their family. "Mr. Morgan, are you all right?" asked Francois, the maître d', approaching with concern. But Richard couldn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the little beggar girl, his mind a storm of memories and unanswered questions. The girl began to cough violently, her small body shaking with the effort. Michael held her hand, casting a pleading look at his father. "She's sick, Dad. We need to help her." Richard Morgan, the man who had built a culinary empire based on absolute control and perfection, found himself paralyzed for the first time in his life. In his jacket pocket, his cell phone vibrated. It was Victor, his majority shareholder, likely calling to confirm the meeting with international investors scheduled for that evening. The girl's cough worsened, and a drop of blood stained the white linen napkin. The silence in the car was suffocating as Richard drove his Mercedes through the city. In the back seat, Michael held the feverish girl in his arms, having wrapped her small, trembling body in his own blazer. Her temperature was rising by the minute, her chapped lips murmuring incomprehensible words. Richard gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. His mind was a whirlwind of memories. Helen at 16, crying after another argument with their parents. Helen at 20, screaming that she hated him. Helen leaving on a rainy night, vowing never to return. 15 years of absolute silence, and now this child appeared like a ghost from the past, wearing the locket he himself had commissioned. "Grandma," the girl murmured in her feverish delirium, "Grandma Rose needs her medicine." And Michael adjusted the blazer around her, his own hands trembling with worry. "Dad, she's burning up." Rose. The name struck Richard like a lightning bolt. Rose had been the housekeeper who practically raised him and Helen, who stood by his sister when everyone else turned their backs. Rose, who disappeared along with Helen on that fateful night. The phone rang again. The fifth call from Victor he'd ignored. The meeting with the Japanese investors was due to start in 20 minutes. Millions were at stake. The future of the Gilded Spoon's international expansion depended on this meeting. St. Luke's Hospital, the illuminated sign appeared ahead. Richard braked sharply, making a split-second decision. "Michael, stay with her. I'll get help." At the emergency room reception, the attendant looked up disdainfully at the girl in rags. "No papers, no service," she declared mechanically. "Hospital policy." "How much?" Richard asked, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "It's not a matter of money, sir, it's the rules. We need documentation, a legal guardian." Michael hugged the girl tighter as she began to convulse. "Dad, please, do something." Richard pulled out his checkbook, writing an amount that made the attendant's eyes widen. Now. 15 minutes later, surrounded by doctors and nurses, they watched helplessly as the girl fought for her life. The chief physician, Dr. Martin, approached with a grave expression. "Severe pneumonia, acute malnutrition, possible sepsis. We need to admit her to the pediatric ICU immediately." He paused, studying Richard. "Are you her legal guardian?" Richard hesitated. His phone vibrated once more. Victor had sent a message. "Investors will cancel everything if you don't show in 5 minutes. Years of work down the drain. Where the hell are you?" "Dad," Michael tugged his sleeve, tears streaming down his face. "We can't abandon her." The doctor cleared his throat. "Sir, we need a decision now. The situation is critical." Richard looked at the girl. Even unconscious, her small hand clutched the locket tightly. He knew one call to his lawyers could sort out the legal situation, but it would mean publicly exposing a story he had buried for 15 years. It would mean admitting his sister had possibly lived and died in squalor while he amassed millions. His phone vibrated one last time. A text from Victor. "It's over. Investors left. Called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. Your obsession with this street urchin will cost you your empire." The girl convulsed again, more violently this time. The machines began to beep frantically. "Code Blue!" a nurse shouted. "We need authorization for emergency procedures now!" Michael gripped his father's hand tightly. "Please, Dad, please!" Richard felt the weight of 15 years of pride and bitterness crushing his chest. The last image he had of Helen was of her walking out the door, pregnant and desperate, refusing his help, conditioned on abandoning the boyfriend he so despised. The doctor was already turning away, ready to call Child Protective Services, when Richard finally found his voice. "She's my niece," the words came out like broken glass from his throat. "I'll take responsibility." As the medical team rushed to save the girl's life, Richard realized he had just sealed his own fate. Somewhere in the city, he knew Victor was already mobilizing the board against him. 15 years, building an empire of perfection and exclusivity, and now it could all crumble because of a nameless child who bore his sister's eyes and a locket from the past. The last thing he saw before the ICU doors swung shut was the girl's pale face, so much like Helen's, it hurt. The cold morning light seeped through the blinds as Claire, Richard's wife, burst down the ICU hallway. Her heels clicked on the vinyl floor as she approached her husband, who had remained motionless in the same uncomfortable chair for 12 hours. "What have you done, Richard?" Her voice trembled with contained indignation. "Victor called me. The entire board is in an uproar. The Japanese cancelled all expansion contracts. Millions, Richard. Millions." He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the glass window, separating the hallway from the bed where the girl fought for her life, connected to tubes and monitors. Michael had finally fallen asleep on the waiting room sofa, exhausted after refusing to leave. "And this absurd story about a niece," Claire continued, lowering her voice. "Don't you see this could be a setup? 15 years, Richard. 15 years without a word from Helen, and now a girl conveniently looking like her shows up." The heart monitor emitted an irregular beep, making Richard jump. A nurse hurried into the room, checked the machines, and adjusted the IV drip. "The doctors say she might not make it through the night," he murmured, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Sepsis. The infection is spreading rapidly." "And if she dies?" Claire asked, sitting beside him. "Have you thought about that? How will you explain to the board that you abandoned the most important meeting of the year to care for a child who ended up dying? They'll use it against you, you know that." Richard closed his eyes, remembering his last conversation with Helen. "You chose money and status over your own family," she had screamed. "One day you'll realize what you've lost, but it'll be too late." Claire's phone vibrated. "It's Michael's school. He has a piano recital this afternoon. The one he's rehearsed for all semester. He's not leaving here," Richard replied, knowing it was true. His son, always so sensitive, so different from himself, had formed an instant bond with the girl. "Ridiculous," Claire sighed. "I'll get him if I have to drag him. He can't throw away the opportunities we've given him for some street urchin." Her words were cut off by a sharp, continuous sound from the monitors. 3 doctors and 2 nurses rushed into the room. Richard shot up, his heart pounding in his chest. "Pressure dropping!" someone shouted. "We need epinephrine!" Michael woke with the commotion and ran to his father. "What's happening? Dad, what's happening to her?" Claire tried to pull her son away from the window, but he wrenched free. "No, let me go. She needs us." Through the glass, Richard watched helplessly as the medical team fought to stabilize the girl. The silver locket gleamed under the fluorescent lights, swinging with the abrupt movements of the emergency procedures. "She can't die," Michael sobbed. "Dad, do something. You always fix everything. You always get what you want. Please, Dad." That's when Richard noticed something on the floor of the room, a small piece of paper that had slipped from the locket during the commotion. One of the nurses, moving around, stepped on it, pushing it under the bed. "We're taking her to surgery, Doctor," Martin announced, rushing out of the room. "The infection has reached vital organs. We need to try an emergency procedure." "What's her chance of survival?" Claire asked, her voice cold. The doctor hesitated. Less than 20%. And even if she survives, the time she spent without proper treatment may have caused permanent damage. Richard felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. If this truly was Helen's daughter, his niece, then he had failed twice, with his sister and now with the girl. The empire he built, the respect he earned, the control he cherished. None of it mattered in the face of losing the last link to his sister. As the gurney was wheeled hastily from the room, Richard glimpsed the small paper under the bed. Something told him that there, in that forgotten fragment, might lie the key to the whole truth, if there was time to discover it. The surgical center seemed to swallow the girl's small body as the double doors closed. Richard remained paralyzed in the hallway, his gaze fixed on the small piece of paper he had retrieved from under the bed. With trembling hands, he unfolded the yellowed fragment. It was an old newspaper clipping, its edges worn with time. The date printed at the top made his stomach churn. Exactly 15 years ago. The headline, partially torn, revealed only a few words. Accident on the interstate. 7 months pregnant, body not found. Mr. Morgan? The social worker's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Andrea Silva was a middle-aged woman with shrewd eyes behind heavy-rimmed glasses. We need to discuss the miner's situation. Claire immediately positioned herself beside her husband, her posture defensive. Michael, refusing to leave the hospital, clung tighter to his father's hand. We have some inconsistencies to clarify, Andrea continued, consulting her clipboard. You claim to be the child's uncle, but we have no documentation to prove it. No birth certificate, no documents from the mother. My sister, Richard interrupted, his voice hoarse. Helen Morgan, Helen Morgan, Andrea read from her notes. We did a preliminary search. Her last official documentation is from 15 years ago. After that, nothing. No death certificate, no medical records, no fixed address. She looked up. Don't you find that convenient? Richard's phone vibrated again. It was Victor. Board meeting in 1 hour. Your presence is mandatory. Last chance to save what's left of your reputation. Dad, Michael tugged his sleeve. You can't go. What if she needs us? Claire interjected quickly. Michael, that's enough. Your father has responsibilities. He can't throw everything away for what, Mom? Michael retorted, angry tears streaming down his face. For someone who needs help. Is that what the Gilded Spoon stands for? We only help those who can pay? Richard felt the weight of his son's words like a punch to the stomach. It was exactly what Helen had said in their last fight. You've become just like our father. Only money matters. Only appearances count. The social worker cleared her throat. There's also the matter of a Mrs. Rose. Richard turned sharply. What about her? The girl, in her lucid moments, mentioned a Grandma Rose several times. We managed to locate a Rose Martinez admitted to City General Hospital. Critical condition, terminal cancer. Andrea paused significantly. She worked for your family for 30 years, didn't she? The world seemed to spin beneath Richard's feet. Rose, the only person who knew the whole truth about that night, was dying in a public hospital while he built his empire of luxury and exclusivity. Mr. Morgan, Andrea continued, her voice now softer, if you're lying about your relationship with the girl, the consequences will be severe. But if you're telling the truth, why did you abandon your pregnant sister? Why did you allow your supposed niece to live on the streets? The words hit Richard like daggers. Claire squeezed his arm, trying to lend strength, but he could feel the tremor in her hands. The intercom from the surgical center buzzed, making everyone jump. Doctor. Martin's voice sounded metallic and urgent. We need the family here now. There's been a complication. Michael sobbed. Richard took a step toward the door, but Andrea blocked his path. I'm sorry, but without proof of kinship, You have no legal authority to make medical decisions. I'll have to contact Child Protective Services to—" "No!" Michael shouted, his voice echoing down the hall. "She's our family. Dad, show them. The locket, her eyes just like Aunt Helen's. Please, Dad, do something." The intercom buzzed again, more urgently. "Patient's family, immediately." Richard Morgan, the man who built an empire on absolute control, found himself cornered between his past and his present, between the truth and the lies he had told himself for 15 years. And now, the life of a little girl, possibly his last link to Helen, depended on his next decision. The sound of heart monitors filled the small surgical emergency room. Richard watched through the glass as doctors worked frantically over the girl's tiny body. He had gained access after signing a waiver assuming full legal responsibility and potential criminal charges if he was lying about the kinship. "Blood pressure plummeting," a nurse announced. "Saturation at 45%. Dr. Martin looked through the glass, his eyes meeting Richard's. "We need a decision now. The procedure that might save her is experimental. The chances are minimal and the risks—" "Do whatever it takes," Richard interrupted, his voice breaking. Across the hall, Claire was arguing in a low voice with Victor, who had arrived at the hospital minutes earlier. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He's different. I've never seen him like this, not even when we lost the second baby." "He's lost his mind," Victor retorted, his face red with anger. 15 years building our reputation. Do you know how much we've lost just today? The Japanese have already spread the word to the entire international hotel network that we're unstable, that we lack credibility. Michael, sitting on the hallway floor, hugged his knees to his chest, rocking back and forth. The tears had dried, leaving salty tracks on his pale face. "Dad," he called softly, "tell me the story of Aunt Helen, please." Richard felt an icy fist clench his heart. For years, he had avoided talking about Helen, turning her into a ghost, a forbidden memory. Michael only knew he had an aunt who had left before he was born. "She was," Richard began, his voice almost a whisper, "the kindest person I ever knew. She played the piano like an angel. She taught me my first notes." The heart monitor emitted an irregular sound, making everyone freeze for a moment. "What happened to her?" Michael asked, his eyes fixed on his unconscious cousin. Richard closed his eyes, the memories he had tried to bury for so long surfacing like open wounds. "I betrayed her, son. She trusted me, asked for my help, and I chose pride. Money, your grandfather's approval. Saturation dropping." The nurse's voice sounded alarmed through the glass. "We're losing her." "Helen was pregnant," Richard continued, the words like poison from an old wound. "Her boyfriend, a street musician. Dad said he was a disgrace to the family. I agreed to help her on one condition, that she give the baby up for adoption, that she forget that bum, as Dad called him." Michael stood up, approaching the glass. The girl, his cousin, seemed even smaller, surrounded by so much medical equipment. "She refused," Richard went on, tears finally streaming down his face. "Said I'd become just like Dad, cold, calculating, obsessed with status. She left in the rain, 7 months pregnant, carrying only a backpack and the locket I'd given her. Rose, our housekeeper, went after her. I never saw them again." "Code Blue," Dr. Martin's voice thundered through the intercom. "Initiate emergency procedure." "What did you do then?" Michael asked, his voice trembling. "Did you look for her?" Richard felt the weight of 15 years of cowardice crushing his chest. "No. I convinced myself it was for the best. I threw myself into work, built the restaurant, created a fortress of luxury and perfection to hide my shame." The sharp, continuous sound of the heart monitor cut the air like a razor. "No pulse!" Someone shouted from inside the room. "Starting chest compressions!" Michael pressed his small hands against the glass. "She can't die, Dad. We can't lose her too." Richard watched, helpless, as the medical team fought to bring his niece back to life. The silver locket still hanging from her fragile neck gleamed under the intense lights of the emergency room, a constant reminder of his cowardice. Across the hall, Victor muttered into his phone, "Yes, call the press. When this story blows up, I want everyone to know I tried to stop this madness." Time seemed to have frozen in that hospital corridor, while the life of a little girl, and perhaps Richard's last chance at redemption, hung by an ever-thinning thread. 3 minutes. Dr. Martin had said that after 3 minutes of cardiac arrest, the chances of brain damage increased dramatically. Richard counted the seconds mentally, each moment an eternity of agony. "Still no pulse," a voice announced from inside the room. 2 milligrams of epinephrine." Michael had started playing an imaginary piano in the air, his fingers moving in a silent melody. "It's Aunt Helen's song," he murmured. "The one you taught me when I was little." The old lullaby their mother used to play for him and Helen. Richard didn't even know he still remembered it, let alone that he'd passed it on to his son. Some memories, he realized, are etched in the soul. Weak pulse, but present. Dr. Martin's voice cut through the silence like a ray of hope. "Maintain epinephrine. We need to stabilize her to continue the procedure." Claire approached hesitantly, her red eyes betraying suppressed tears. "Richard, Victor is threatening to go to the press. He says he'll expose everything. Helen's story, the girl, how you abandoned the investors." "Let him," Richard replied, his voice surprisingly calm. "I'm not making the same mistake twice." Claire's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen and paled. It's from City General, about Rose." Richard felt his heart skip a beat. Rose, the only person who could confirm the whole story, who might have answers about the last 15 years. "She's asking to see you," Claire continued, her voice trembling. "The doctors say there isn't much time." Michael gripped his father's hand. "Go, Dad. I'll stay with her. I promise I won't leave." Richard glanced once more through the glass. The girl was stable, but still critically fragile. Every second away from her felt like a betrayal. But Rose had the answers he desperately needed. "Dr. Martin," he called through the intercom, "how long until we know?" The doctor looked up, exhausted. "The next hour is crucial. If she survives the procedure and the night, her chances improve considerably." In the hallway, Victor was still on the phone, now not bothering to lower his voice. "Exactly. A story of family abandonment, neglect, possible fraud. The great Richard Morgan isn't as perfect as everyone thinks." Claire held her husband's arm. "Richard, if you go see Rose now, Victor will use it against you. He'll say you abandoned the girl again." "No," Michael interrupted, his voice small but firm. "Dad isn't abandoning anyone. He's trying to fix things." Richard kissed his son's forehead, surprised by his maturity. "Take care of her for me, son. I'll be back as soon as I can." In the elevator, on his way to the parking garage, Richard allowed the tears to finally fall. The newspaper clipping in his pocket seemed to burn. That incomplete headline about an accident, a pregnant woman, a body not found. What really happened that rainy night? His phone rang again. It was an unknown number. The message made his blood run cold. "I know the truth about your sister, about the accident, about the insurance money. Rose isn't the only one who's kept secrets all these years. Meet me at the cafe across from the hospital in 15 minutes, or the truth goes to the press along with the proof." Richard looked up at the elevator ceiling, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Rose was dying in one hospital. His niece was fighting for her life in an ICU. And now someone was threatening to expose a secret he didn't even know existed. The elevator reached the ground floor with a soft ding. The doors opened to reveal Victor, standing directly in front of him, a cold smile on his lips. "Where are you off to in such a hurry, old friend?" The cafe across from the hospital was practically empty at that hour of the night. Richard sat at a table in the back, watching Victor slowly stir his untouched cup of coffee. His former partner looked different, no longer the calculating businessman, but someone worn down by a secret too heavy to bear. "Did you ever wonder how we got the gilded spoon approved so quickly?" Victor began, his voice low and controlled. "How, in less than a year after your sister left, we became the most exclusive restaurant in the city." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "Your sister," Victor continued, "was investigating some irregularities in your father's companies before she disappeared. Damaging documents. The kind of thing that could destroy not only the family's reputation, but send a lot of powerful people to jail." Richard's phone vibrated. It was Michael. He ignored the call, his eyes fixed on Victor. "The night of the accident," Victor went on, "she was carrying a folder. Your father offered her money to get it back, but she refused, so..." He paused, taking a sip of the cold coffee. "So I made a decision." "You..." Richard felt bile rise in his throat. "What did you do?" "I had someone follow her, just to retrieve the documents, you understand. But the idiot, he lost control on a curve. Her car flipped." Richard shot up, knocking over his chair. His hands trembled with rage and horror. "Your father never knew," Victor continued, unfazed. "He gave me carte blanche to solve the problem, no questions asked. The insurance money, the permits for the restaurant, it all came from that. You were too busy drowning in guilt to ever question anything." The phone vibrated again. Now it was Claire. Once again, Richard ignored it. "Why are you telling me this now?" Victor smiled humorlessly. "Because Rose knows. She was in the car with Helen that night, survived the crash, got your injured sister away. And now, on her deathbed, she might spill everything." Richard felt the world spin. Rose knew. For 15 years she had kept this secret, protecting Helen, raising her daughter. "So that's why," he murmured, "all this time you've been monitoring Rose. That's why you're so desperate to stop me from seeing her." "You have a choice," Victor leaned forward. "You can run to City General, listen to a dying old woman's confession, and destroy everything we've built. Or you can go back to the ICU, sign the papers, transferring your shares to me, and I'll ensure your niece gets the best possible treatment." The phone vibrated a third time. It was Dr. Martin. This time, Richard answered. "Mr. Morgan," the doctor's voice sounded urgent. "Your niece, she woke up. She's asking for Grandma Rose." Victor watched the change in Richard's face. "Ah, let me guess. The little bastard survived. Even better. Now I have more time for you to consider my offer." Richard looked out the cafe window towards the hospital. On the 10th floor, he knew his niece had just opened her eyes, the same heterochromatic eyes as Helen. At City General, miles away, Rose waited to reveal the truth that could change everything. "You have 1 hour," Victor stood up, leaving a few bills on the table. "After that, the story goes to the press. Not the fabricated one I cooked up about your obsession with a street urchin, but the real one. About how the great Richard Morgan built his empire on his own sister's blood." When Victor left the cafe, Richard remained motionless, the weight of 15 years of lies crushing his chest. His phone vibrated once more. It was Michael. "Dad." His son's voice was choked with emotion. "She opened her eyes, and you know the first thing she did? She started humming that song, Aunt Helen's song." The ICU hallway had never seemed so long to Richard. Each step towards his niece's room felt like lead. Victor's words echoed in his mind, mingling with the melody Michael had mentioned, the lullaby their mother used to play. Before entering the room, he paused at the door, observing the scene through the glass. Michael was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his cousin's small, fragile hand. Claire, surprisingly, had pulled a chair close and was stroking the girl's hair as she slept. She hummed for a few minutes and went back to sleep. "Doctor," Martin explained in a low voice. "The fact that she woke up is an excellent sign, but the next 24 hours are still critical." Richard nodded mechanically, unable to form words. How could he explain to Michael that the empire they'd built, the restaurant that was his pride, had been founded on the attempted murder of his own aunt? "Dad," Michael called softly, seeing him. She said something before she fell asleep. Claire looked up, and Richard noticed she had been crying. "She said, 'Mommy used to play like that,'" Claire whispered. "Richard, she has Helen's fingers, long, like a pianist's." The heart monitor kept its steady rhythm, each beep reminding Richard he was running out of time. Rose waited at City General, possibly in her last moments. Victor had given him an hour to decide. "Michael," he called to his son, "I need you to stay with her. There's something I—" "No," Claire interrupted, standing up. "You're not going alone." "Whatever Victor said in that cafe, I saw your face when you came back. This is bigger than a fight over restaurant shares, isn't it?" Richard looked at his wife, surprised by her insight. In 15 years of marriage, Claire had always been the pragmatic one, supporting him in all his business decisions. Now, for the first time, he saw something different in her: compassion. "The truth," he began, his voice failing, "will change everything." "The truth has already changed everything," Claire replied, grabbing her purse. "The moment that girl walked through the Gilded Spoon's doors, nothing would ever be the same. And maybe it's time." The girl stirred in bed, her heterochromatic eyes opening slowly. "Grandma Rose," she murmured, "the music." Michael immediately began to hum the melody, and his cousin's eyes filled with tears. "Mommy sang like that," she whispered. Richard approached the bed, his heart pounding. What's your name, little one?" "Helen," she replied, her voice barely a breath. "Mommy said it was the name of the brightest star in the sky." Claire stifled a sob. Richard felt his legs weaken. Helen had named her daughter after him, even after everything, even after he had abandoned her. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from Victor. 45 minutes, tick-tock. "We need to go to City General," Richard declared, his voice finding a strength he didn't know he still possessed. "Michael, stay with Helen. Claire, I'm going with you," she completed, determined. "We lost this family once to pride and fear. We're not losing it again." Little Helen squeezed Michael's hand. "Will you play for me again? Mommy's song?" "I'll learn all the songs your mom played," Michael promised, his eyes shining, "and I'll teach you every single one." Richard and Claire reached the door when they heard Helen's faint voice. "Uncle Richard?" He turned, his heart stopping for a moment. "Mommy kept all your letters," she said, her heterochromatic eyes fixed on him, "even though you never sent any back." Richard felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath him. Letters? What letters? In 15 years he hadn't sent a single letter to Helen. His phone vibrated again. Victor. File attached. Photo, letters, JPG. In the image, dozens of envelopes stacked up, all bearing the Gilded Spoon's logo. Someone had been corresponding with Helen all these years, using his name. Someone close enough to have access to the restaurant's letterhead. Someone who knew exactly where she was the whole time. Claire looked over his shoulder at the photo and paled. "Richard, I recognize that handwriting." The car sped through the night towards City General, while Claire held the phone with trembling hands, staring at the picture of the letters. "It's your father's handwriting," she whispered. "All those letters were written by your father." Richard felt as if all the air had been sucked from his lungs. His father, the inflexible patriarch who had practically disowned Helen, who refused to even mention her name after she left, had he been in secret contact with her all these years? "Impossible," he muttered, taking a sharp turn. "Dad died 5 years ago without ever showing remorse. He would have told me something." "How did you show remorse?" Claire asked softly. "Sometimes, Richard, pride stops us from saying the most important words, even when they're choking our hearts." The phone vibrated again. Another message from Victor. 30 minutes, and since we're spilling secrets, ask your father about the trust fund he set up for your sister. Oops, he can't answer anymore, can he?" Richard slammed on the brakes, pulling the car over. His hands trembled so much he could barely grip the steering wheel. "He knew," Richard whispered, the realization hitting him like a thunderbolt. "Dad knew Victor was behind the accident. That's why he set up the trust fund in secret, why he stayed in touch with Helen. He was trying to protect her." Claire placed her hand on his. "And now Victor is using it against you. He must have found out about the letters and the fund when your father died." The phone rang. It was Michael. "Dad." His voice was agitated. "Helen's having nightmares. She keeps calling for her mom and Grandma Rose, saying she needs to deliver something important." Richard closed his eyes, remembering the locket. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a vault of secrets, holding not only the newspaper clipping but possibly other evidence Helen had collected. "How's her fever?" Claire asked, concern evident in her voice. "Dr. Martin is here. He says it's normal, just traumatic memories surfacing as she recovers, but..." Michael paused. "Dad, she said something about a music box. Said her mom hid something important inside a music box." Richard felt his heart stop for a moment. The music box. The 15th birthday gift he'd given Helen the day she found out she was pregnant. The same box that played their mother's lullaby. "Michael," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "ask her where the box is." There was a moment of silence, just the sound of Helen's agitated breathing in the background. Then her faint voice emerged. "In Grandma Rose's basement. Mummy said only Uncle Richard would know how to open it." Claire looked at her husband, understanding dawning in her eyes. "The box had a special mechanism, didn't it? Something only you and Helen knew." Richard nodded, memories flooding his mind. A sequence of notes. The same melody Michael is teaching her. The box only opened when the sequence was played correctly. His phone vibrated once more. Victor had sent another message. "Interesting photo I found in your father's files. A music box and some very compromising documents. I have people heading to Rose's house right now. Care to race?" "Richard," Claire squeezed his arm, "Rose is dying. The box is in danger, and our niece, she needs to know the truth about her mother." Richard started the car, making a sharp U-turn. "Call the social worker," he instructed. "Andrea Silva. Tell her we have proof of kinship, and call Dr. Martin. We need him to keep Helen stable until we sort this out." Claire was already dialing when another message arrived. This time, it was a photo that made Richard's blood run cold. Victor, smiling beside his sister Helen, apparently taken just months before the accident. In the background, partially visible, was the music box. "My God," Claire whispered. "He wasn't just following your sister that night. He was close to her, close enough to gain her trust," Richard completed, stepping on the accelerator, "and find out exactly what she knew." City General Hospital was a grey, worn-down building, a stark contrast to the modern facility where Helen was being treated. Richard and Claire rushed through the dimly lit corridors, following signs to the terminal care wing. "Room 407, the nurse indicated, her tired face barely concealing her surprise at seeing the well-dressed couple in such a grim environment. "But she's very weak. She won't make it through the night." The room was small and stuffy, with only a narrow window letting in the faint light from the street lamps. Rose lay in bed, her frail body almost disappearing among the worn sheets. Her eyes, however, held the same sharp glint Richard remembered from his childhood. "Finally," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I thought you wouldn't make it in time." Richard approached the bed, taking his former housekeeper's bony hand. "Rose, why didn't you ever tell me? All these years?" "Because you weren't ready to listen," she replied, each word a visible effort. "Just like your father wasn't ready to admit his mistakes. Until it was too late." Claire checked her phone. A message from Michael. "Helen is asking about the music box. She says there's something important inside, something her mother kept to protect Uncle Richard." "Victor is going after the box," Richard told Rose. "We need to get there first." A faint smile touched the old woman's lips. Victor, always so predictable, so desperate for power, he didn't see the obvious. "What do you mean?" Rose closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "Helen knew he was following her, knew he worked for your father. That's why she set a trap." Richard felt his heart race. Claire moved closer to the bed, recording every word on her phone. "The music box," Rose continued, "was a decoy. The real documents. Helen gave them to someone Victor would never think to look for, someone he considered too insignificant to notice. "You," Claire whispered. Rose nodded slightly. "For 15 years, I kept everything. The proof of corruption, the documents about the accident, your father's letters, waiting for the right moment, waiting for you to be ready to face the truth." Richard's phone vibrated, a message from Victor. "Box found. Want to negotiate now or after the press gets the accident photos? Where are the documents, Rose?" Richard asked urgently. The old woman coughed, blood staining the white sheet. Helen wanted you to know she forgave you. Your father's letters. She read them to little Helen every night, so she would know the family she could never have." "Rose, please," Claire pleaded, seeing life slowly drain from the housekeeper's eyes. "The documents." "The locket," Rose whispered. "The real one. Not the one the girl wears. Helen left the original with the person she trusted most in the world." "And where is this person?" Richard asked, desperate. Rose smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "In the same place you buried your heart 15 years ago. In the place where it all began and where it all must end." The phone rang. It was Michael again, his voice agitated. "Dad, Helen's having another nightmare. She keeps repeating something about a piano. The old piano at Grandma's house." Richard felt the blood drain from his face. The piano in the mansion where he grew up, where Helen had her first lessons, where their mother played the lullaby. The house he had kept locked up for 15 years, unable to face the ghosts of the past. "Victor will never find the documents in the music box," Rose murmured, her voice growing weaker, "because the real treasure is hidden in memories he never understood, in the music he could never hear." Claire squeezed her husband's arm. "Richard, we have to go. Now." Rose gripped Richard's hand with surprising strength. "Your sister. She made me promise I'd only reveal everything when you were ready to hear the music again. When your heart finally opened to the truth." The machines began to beep and nurses rushed into the room. Rose, with her last breath, whispered, "The locket is inside the piano. But it will only open. It will only open with the right song. The song your son is teaching, little Helen." The rusted gate of the Morgan estate groaned as Richard pushed it open. The once manicured garden was overgrown with weeds. The central fountain, where he and Helen used to play on summer afternoons, was dry and cracked. 15 years of neglect had turned the place into a museum of dusty memories. Claire held her phone on speaker as they walked up the stone path. Michael was on the other end, trying to keep little Helen calm as she experienced another bout of fever. "The music, Michael," Richard instructed, his hands trembling as he fumbled for the old keys. "I need you to record Helen singing the melody. Every note has to be perfect." The main door creaked open, releasing a smell of mildew and age. In the entrance hall, covered by a thick layer of dust, the grand piano stood like a silent guardian of the family's secrets. "Dad," Michael's voice sounded worried over the phone, "Helen is saying something about a code. She says it's not just the melody. It has to be played a special way." Richard approached the piano, carefully removing the protective cover. The yellowed keys seemed to stare back at him accusingly. How many times had he ignored Helen's pleas to play together? How many times had he said music was a waste of time, that she should focus on the family business? "Richard," Claire called softly, pointing to marks in the dust on the piano. "Someone's been here recently." His phone vibrated, another message from Victor. "Looking in the wrong place, old friend. Already searched Rose's house. Now it's just a matter of time before I find the documents. Want to try and salvage some of your reputation while you still can?" "He doesn't know," Richard murmured, his fingers tracing the keys reverently. "Helen was much smarter than all of us. She knew Victor would never understand." A sound from upstairs made them both freeze. Footsteps. Someone else was in the house. "Quick," Claire whispered. "We need the melody before they find us." Michael was still on the line. "Helen's calmer now. She's singing again." The girl's faint voice came through the phone, shaky but determined. The old lullaby floated through the dusty air of the mansion, each note laden with hidden meanings and memories. Richard closed his eyes, letting the music guide his fingers. The first notes sounded hesitant, out of tune after so long, but gradually, like a river thawing in spring, the melody began to flow. "It's not just the music," Helen whispered through the phone. "Mommy used to say..." She used to say love has its own rhythm." The footsteps upstairs were closer now. Claire clutched the phone tightly, torn between looking at the staircase and watching Richard's fingers on the piano. "Love has its own rhythm," Richard repeated, suddenly remembering. "My God, Helen used to say that when we were children, when Mom played for us." His fingers found the rhythm, not the standard rhythm of the song, but the special way their mother used to play it, with slight pauses between certain notes, like the beats of a loving heart. A metallic click sounded from within the piano. "Found it!" a voice shouted from upstairs. "The music box was hidden in the attic." Claire rushed to lock the drawing room door as Richard, with trembling hands, reached into the secret compartment that had opened on the side of the piano. Inside, a locket identical to the one little Helen wore, but much older. "Dad!" Michael called urgently. "Helen's saying there's a secret about how to open the locket." The footsteps on the stairs were closer. Brusque attempts on the doorknob made Claire step back. "Helen," Richard spoke directly to his niece, "Sweetheart, we need to know. How did your mother open the locket?" The girl's voice was weak but clear. "Mommy said a heart only opens when it finds its perfect match." Richard looked at the locket in his hands, then at the photo of Helen on his phone, wearing the identical locket. 2 lockets, 2 halves of a broken heart. The drawing room door shuddered with a heavy impact. On the other side, Victor's voice sounded triumphant. "It's over, Richard. I have the music box. I'll be in there in a minute and you'll..." But Richard was no longer listening. With trembling hands, he brought the 2 lockets together, the old one from the piano and the image of the one Helen wore. Like 2 halves of a shattered heart, they fit perfectly. The sound of the door being kicked in echoed through the room. At the exact moment the two lockets clicked together, a secret drawer slid open at the base of the piano, revealing an envelope yellowed with age. Victor burst through the door, followed by two burly men. In his hands, the old music box looked small and fragile. His triumphant smile froze as he saw Richard holding the envelope. "Impossible," he muttered. "The documents were supposed to be in the box." "Helen was always smarter than all of us," Richard replied, his voice calm despite his racing heart. "She knew you'd look in the box, knew you'd never think of the piano." Claire still held the phone, where little Helen's faint breathing could be heard. Michael was whispering words of comfort to his cousin, keeping her awake. "It doesn't matter." Victor regained his composure, advancing a few steps. "You're not leaving here with those documents. Not after all this time. Not after everything I've built." "Built on my sister's blood," Richard completed, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "You followed her that night. You caused the accident." Victor laughed, a humorless sound. "She left me no choice. She was about to destroy everything. Your father's reputation, the businesses, my political connections, a foolish little girl playing detective." "She was pregnant," Claire interjected, her voice thick with contempt. "You tried to kill a pregnant woman." "And failed," Victor snarled. "She survived, ran off with that meddling old woman. But now..." He gestured to his goons. "Now let's finish what we started 15 years ago." The phone rang. It was Dr. Martin. Claire answered with trembling hands. "Mrs. Morgan." The doctor's voice sounded urgent. "Little Helen's fever is back. She's calling for her father. Her uncle. She says she has something important to tell him, something about the night of the accident." Victor drew a gun, pointing it directly at Richard. "Give me the documents now." "Dad," Michael's voice came through the phone. "Helen's saying something about a recording. She says her mum left a recording inside the locket." Richard looked at the joined lockets in his hand. They weren't just two halves of a heart. They were an old recording device, the kind used for short messages in greeting cards. "You want to know what's in the documents, Victor?" Richard asked, his fingers fumbling for the tiny button on the side of the locket. "Why don't we listen together?" Before Victor could react, Helen's voice, the adult Helen, the sister Richard hadn't heard in 15 years, filled the dusty drawing room. "If you're hearing this, Richard, it means you've finally found the music in your heart again. Victor has a gun pointed at you right now, doesn't he? So predictable." Victor paled, his hand trembling slightly. "But he doesn't know," Helen's voice continued, "that every meeting, every negotiation, every threat he's made in the last 15 years, it's all been recorded. Rose didn't just keep documents, my brother. She kept the truth. And now, at this very moment, that truth is being sent to every board member of the Gilded Spoon, to the police, to the press." "Lies," Victor whispered, but his face had lost all color. "You underestimated Rose." Helen's voice had a touch of sad amusement. "You underestimated the old housekeeper who served our family for 30 years, who had access to every corner of the mansion, every important meeting. Richard, forgive me for leaving like that. Forgive me for not trusting you that night. But now you have a chance to do the right thing. Please take care of my Helen. Teach her the song Mum taught us." The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, rapidly approaching. "Impossible," Victor muttered, looking frantically at his phone. Dozens of notifications popped up on the screen, messages from the board, missed calls, news alerts. "How?" "Rose," Claire whispered, understanding. Her last words weren't just a confession. They were a signal. "The last act of love from a loyal housekeeper," Richard completed, tears streaming down his face. "The last gift from a sister who never stopped believing in redemption." Victor raised the gun, his eyes wild with desperation, but it was too late. The sirens were right outside, and through the dusty windows, red and blue lights began to illuminate the abandoned mansion's drawing room. The wail of sirens filled the air as Victor, in a final act of desperation, pointed the gun at the piano. "If I can't have the documents, no one will. That piano has kept secrets for 15 years. Time to silence it for good." "No!" Michael shouted through the phone. "Dad, Helen's crying. She says the piano. She says her mom left something else in there." Richard moved instinctively in front of the instrument, shielding it with his body. 15 years ago, I let my sister leave in the rain. I won't make the same mistake twice. The flashing lights of the cruisers reflected in the dusty windows, creating a surreal kaleidoscope of blue and red in the room. Victor's 2 goons had already vanished, leaving him alone for his last stand. "You don't understand," Victor laughed, a hysterical sound. "That accident, it wasn't meant to hurt her. I loved her, Helen and I. We had a plan. We were going to run away together, start over far from all this rottenness. But she found out. Found out I was involved in your father's fraudulent schemes," Claire gasped, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. "That's why you followed her that night. It wasn't just for the documents. She chose the truth over our love." Victor spat the words, his hand trembling on the trigger. "Chose to expose everything, destroy everything we'd built." "Dad!" Michael's voice sounded urgent through the phone. "Helen's singing again, but it's different now. It's like she's responding to another song." Richard closed his eyes, letting the soft notes guide his fingers to the piano. The old melody filled the room, but there was something more. An echo, a response, as if the instrument itself held memories of the hands that once played it. "Impossible," Victor murmured, his gun lowering slightly. "That song. The song you never understood," Richard replied, continuing to play. "Our family's secret language. Helen knew you'd never comprehend." With each note, a new secret compartment slid open in the piano. Not documents this time, but photographs. Dozens of them, showing Victor in secret meetings, exchanging briefcases, signing suspicious papers. Rose, the faithful housekeeper, had silently documented everything over the years. "Dad!" Michael called again. "Dr. Martin says Helen's heart rate is stabilizing. It's as if the music is calming her." The sirens were deafening now. Authoritative voices ordered everyone to come out with their hands up. Victor stared at the photographs scattered on the floor, his empire crumbling with each revealed image. "You never deserved her." Richard continued playing, his tears falling onto the keys. "Helen was light. She was music. She was truth. And you tried to turn her into just another piece in your dirty game." "Richard," Claire called softly, pointing to the phone. On the screen, a live video feed showed little Helen in the hospital, her heterochromatic eyes shining as she hummed along with the piano's melody, Michael holding her hand. Victor watched the scene, his gun finally falling to his side. "She has the same eyes," he murmured, defeated, "the same eyes that have haunted me for 15 years. The drawing room door burst open, police officers flooding the room, weapons drawn. Victor offered no resistance as handcuffs closed around his wrists. His last look was at the piano, at the photographs that told the story of his betrayal, his sick obsession. "Mr. Morgan," an investigator approached Richard, who still hadn't stopped playing. "We need you to come with us. There's one more thing you need to see." Claire took the phone, focusing on little Helen. "Michael, honey, stay with her. We're coming back to the hospital now." But Richard couldn't stop playing. Each note seemed to wash away years of guilt, of regret. The music his mother taught, that Helen kept alive, that now healed the wounds of a new generation. "Richard," Claire called softly, "there's something here you need to see. In the false bottom of the piano's last drawer lay a sealed envelope, yellowed with time. On the back, Helen's delicate handwriting, "For my brother, when the music finally brings you back home." The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft beep of monitors and the melody Michael still played on a small electronic keyboard Claire had brought. Little Helen slept peacefully for the first time in days, her face serene, the locket gleaming softly under the diffuse light. Richard sat in the armchair beside the bed, Helen's unopened envelope still in his trembling hands. Claire had taken Michael home to rest, promising to return in the morning. Outside, the city was beginning to wake, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded during the night. "She's much better," Dr. Martin commented quietly, checking her vitals. "The fever has completely subsided. It's almost as if she was just waiting for all the truths to come out to finally allow herself to heal." Richard looked at his niece, seeing so much of Helen in her delicate features. The same heterochromatic eyes, the same way of sleeping with one hand under her face, the same love for music he had once dismissed as a waste of time. "Doctor," he called softly, "how long until she can go home?" The doctor smiled. "If she keeps improving like this, in a few days. But have you sorted out the guardianship issue?" In response, Richard showed him the documents the social worker, Andrea, had just brought. The DNA test confirming their kinship, the records Rose had kept all these years, little Helen's birth certificate. "She really thought of everything," Andrea commented, organizing the papers. Rose kept every document updated, every vaccination on schedule, even while living in the shadows. She was just waiting for the right moment. Richard stroked his niece's hair, allowing the tears to finally fall freely. "And I missed all of it. Every moment, every smile, every song." "No, you haven't," a faint voice responded. Little Helen had woken up and was watching him with her extraordinary eyes. "Mommy used to say you were always with us, in the songs she played." She tried to sit up, and Richard quickly adjusted the pillows to support her. "You play just like her," Helen continued. "Grandma Rose always said you'd play for me one day, just like you played for Mommy." Richard showed her the envelope. "Your mother, she left this for me. Do you want to read it with me?" Helen nodded, her eyes shining with curiosity. Carefully, Richard opened the envelope, the delicate paper almost crumbling in his hands. Inside was a letter and handwritten sheet music. "Dear brother," he began to read, his voice choked with emotion. "If you're reading this, it means you've finally found your way back to the music, to the truth, to the love our family always shared through the notes of the piano." Helen rested her head on her uncle's shoulder as he read. The letter spoke of forgiveness, of hope, of a love that transcended bitterness and pride. Helen, the elder Helen, told of her first years after the accident, how Rose had saved her, how she had found peace in a small town, giving piano lessons. "My daughter," the letter continued, "carries our love for music in her blood. Every note I teach her is also a memory of you, Richard, of the brother you were, of the uncle I know you'll be when the right time comes." Richard paused, his hands trembling as he held the sheet music. It was the old lullaby, but with variations he had never seen before. In the margins, small notes in faded ink told the family's story through the music. "It's our song," little Helen whispered, her small fingers tracing the notes on the paper. "But Mommy made it more beautiful. She said every time she played it, she added a little bit of new love." She also left this. Richard showed a small USB drive that had been hidden in the envelope. "I think she has more messages for you." Helen smiled, a smile so like her mother's it made Richard's heart ache. "I don't need to listen now," she said. "Mommy's here, in the music, and now you're here too." Outside the room, Andrea watched the scene with tears in her eyes. In her hands were the final documents needed to formalize the guardianship, not just temporary custody, but a full adoption, officially making little Helen a Morgan. The morning sun began to stream through the hospital window, casting a golden glow on the uncle and niece as they examined the sheet music together, their voices mingling in a soft melody that spoke of loss, of love, and finally, of redemption. 3 months later, the gilded spoon was different. The tables with white tablecloths and silver cutlery were still there, but now they shared space with simpler tables, arranged in a new wing of the restaurant called Helen's Corner. There, twice a week, children from different social backgrounds received free music lessons and meals. The grand piano remained in its place of honor, but now 2 figures took turns playing. Michael and Helen, cousins united by music and love, enchanted patrons with duets that blended classics with the family's special lullaby, now known as the Melody of Forgiveness. On that special Sunday evening, the restaurant was closed for a private event. The tables had been moved aside, creating space for what would be Helen's first official recital. Richard adjusted his tuxedo's bow tie, watching in the office mirror as Claire arranged a flower display. "The board unanimously approved," she commented, smiling. "The social program will be expanded to all branches. Who would have thought the Gilded Spoon would become known not just for its cuisine, but for transforming lives through music?" Richard picked up the locket he now carried always, no longer as a symbol of guilt, but as a reminder of redemption. Inside, the photo of the adult Helen had been replaced by a new one. Helen and Michael at the piano, their smiles illuminating the entire picture. "Dad!" Michael burst through the office door excited. "You have to see Helen! She looks beautiful in the dress Grandma Rose picked out." Rose had miraculously recovered after that night of revelations. The doctors couldn't explain it, but she said it had been the music, the same music that had kept Helen alive all those years, that had guarded the family's secrets until the right moment. The main dining room was packed. Families of the children participating in the social project mingled naturally with the restaurant's regular patrons. At the center of the improvised stage, the piano gleamed under the soft lights. Helen appeared in a sky-blue dress, her heterochromatic eyes shining with emotion. Rose, seated in the front row in a wheelchair, applauded with tears in her eyes. Beside her, Andrea Silva smiled, holding the official adoption papers that had been finalized that morning. "Good evening," Helen spoke into the microphone, her voice small but firm. "The music I'm going to play tonight was written by 3 generations of my family. It started with my grandmother, was transformed by my mother, and now," she looked at Richard with a smile, "now it has gained new chords with my uncle and my cousin." Michael sat beside her on the piano bench, his small hands poised over the keys. Richard watched, his hand intertwined with Claire's, as the first chords of the song filled the room. It was the old melody, but different. Richer, more complex, carrying in its notes not just the story of a family, but the promise of a future built on love, forgiveness, and music. Helen's and Michael's hands danced over the keys, their souls connected through a language that transcended words. In the audience, faces turned to hide tears. It wasn't just the chords that touched hearts, it was the story behind them. The story of a girl who, through music, found her way back home. The story of a man who learned that success isn't measured in figures, but in musical notes played with love. Rose closed her eyes, her hands invisibly tracing keys in the air. In her lap, the old locket now held a new recording, no longer secrets and accusations, but Helen's voice singing to her mother, telling her about her new home, about the uncle who had learned to love again, about the cousin who had become her best friend. When the last note sounded, The silence that followed was unlike any the Gilded Spoon had ever known. It wasn't the respectful silence of formal dinners, but the reverent silence of hearts, touched by the simplest, most profound truth. That love, like music, has the power to heal, to transform, to redeem. Helen stood up and ran to embrace Richard. "Now she can rest in peace," she whispered, referring to her mother, "because the music has come home." Richard lifted his niece into his arms, feeling the gentle weight of her unconditional love. Michael joined the hug, followed by Claire. Rose watched the scene with a serene smile, knowing her mission was finally complete. The Gilded Spoon would never again be just an exclusive restaurant. It had become a sanctuary where music and love could heal broken hearts, where second chances were served alongside meals, where an old lullaby had taught the most valuable of lessons, that there's no greater force than a family's love, even if that love needs 15 years and a melody to find its way back home.